Hello everyone, welcome to Codivate's Introduction to Python class. Over the next few weeks, we will learn how to code and write algorithms in this Python programming language. Alright, so what is Python? As I mentioned earlier, Python is a programming language. Any language, even the ones we speak, like English, have a general format. We call this syntax. We will learn how to communicate with the computer using Python syntax so we can tell it what task we want it to carry out. Alright, learning Python is a pretty valuable skill to have. Not only is it useful for computer science jobs, it is also used in other jobs. Python is used for data science in business fields and other STEM-based fields. One of its applications, web development, involves creating and maintaining websites. There's also software development, which involves creating applications and writing computer programs for companies or users. Although in this introductory course we will not get into the specifics of the topics, in our course we will be teaching the basic skills you need to code in Python, and it will set you up for success if you do choose to eventually work with one of these topics. So, in order to run Python code, we need a compiler. There are several ways to do this. After downloading Python, we can download an integrated development environment, or for short, we call them IDEs. We can write Python codes in IDEs and then run the code on the computer. In the IDE, it is easy for the programmer to write code, and then the compiler will translate this code so the computer can understand and execute it. However, due to the limitations of certain computers, not all of them can support IDEs. So in our case, we're going to be using an online compiler called Replit. Alright, so first we have to create a Replit account. And in order to do that, what we have to do is open up a web browser and type in Replit. So once you do that, you have to press enter, and after searching that up, unless you've already had experience with REPL before, your page should look something like this. So if you have already used REPL before, you can just click login and open up a new Python project. But if you haven't, that's perfectly fine as well. We will go through the process for making a Replit together. So now what you want to do is click this sign up button that's either here or here. You can see in the top right or in the center of the page. You can click one of those to sign up. Alright. After clicking sign up, you'll be brought to this page. It is recommended that you use your Gmail account to create your Replit account, but if you want, you can also use a different email using the option that's in the screen over here with the username and the password. So to make the account for REPL using a Gmail, what you have to do is click on this G that's over here, and that will take you to the login page for Gmail. So after signing up with email, you will be asked to set a username. So you can make anything of your choice. And then you will be asked to confirm your email. So just type in whatever email works best for you. Alright, let's move on to the next part of creating our Replit account. You will be asked a series of questions. The first question will ask you, what's your skill level when it comes to programming? So you can choose the option that best describes you, and then you can press continue. The next question will ask you about interests. You can choose learning, or you can just press skip. If you choose learning, you should choose the in a school or institute option. Then you'll be asked to choose 3 languages that you're interested in. Definitely choose Python. This is a Python class. And then you can decide the other 2 languages by yourself. If you don't know, you could just choose 2 random ones for right now. You will then be asked to verify your account through the email you used to sign up. Let me know when you've successfully set up your email, and once you're done with that, you can move on. Alright, so once you've successfully made your account, we can get started with coding. So in order to actually make a REPL.it program, our first step is to scroll down and you will see this option that will look something like this that says or start coding. And you can click Python. So this will create a Python file for us. And now what we have is this page. Once we click Python, we get this page. And what we have here is a new program file. You will see a username in the top left, and you will see a file name just next to it. So let's just review the other parts of this file. We are writing our code in main.py, which is over here, and when we press the run button, our output will appear in this onto the right. You can see this black console here. We call it the console in Python. All right, let's move on. So in the top left corner with the name and with your username and the file name, we can change the name of the file by clicking down on this drop down here. And once we do that, we can change this random name that is generated by REPL to something that actually is more meaningful. We can call it Codivate Python class week 1. It is good practice to name your files, so you can do it based on the project you're doing or the class you're doing. So the next part that we're going to go over is how to make a folder to get organized in REPL. This next part is completely optional. You don't have to do it, but if you want to keep all your work for this class organized, it is a pretty good idea to do it. And this part is making a folder. So I think it would be best if I just do a screen demonstration to go over how to do this part. Alright, so let's go to our REPL.it. What we want to do is click on these 3 lines in the top left corner, and once you do that, you'll see an option to create a new folder. You want to click that, create, I guess, a new folder. Let's make it a test folder just for the purpose of this video. And once we once we have this folder, inside that, what we want to do is put all of the work that we created. So you can just create a new REPL inside, or what you can do is go home and move the REPL that you just created and put it inside the folder. That's also an option. So once you've done that, we can move on to the next part. Let's go back to the presentation. Once again, this entire thing with folders is not required, but it is useful for organization. Alright, so then we could drag our file, as I mentioned. And once we click that file that we just made, we can go back to our file and we can get started with coding. So let's go to the first concept, which is basing the basics of printing something to the console. As I mentioned earlier, the console is the right side of the screen. That's where all of our output will appear. A print statement helps us display something onto the console, so we know what's going on as the programmers. So let's learn how to write print statements in Python. So as we're doing these coding exercises in class, it is a good idea to have your own REPL.it open so you can follow along. This is how we would print hello world to the console in Python. Let's break this line down piece by piece. The first part of the print statement is the print function. We just type in the word print, exactly as you see on the slide, no uppercase letters. As soon as the compiler sees print, it knows that we want to print something to the console. Another part of the printing syntax is parentheses. whatever we want to print must be enclosed in parentheses. As we go later in this course, we will look into the details of the print statement and why we use parentheses, but for now, it's important to understand that we have to enclose what we print in parentheses. Okay, so let's get to what we actually want to print. In this case, it is hello world. It is also important that we enclose the word that or phrase that we're printing in quotation marks, because that tells the compiler that we have a string. A string is just a fancy way in Python of calling a word or a bunch of characters. So once you write this code segment down in Python, as it is, you can press the run button on the top of your REPL page, and your output should look something like this. Hello world. It's printed to the console. So just a brief note about print statements in Python. We can use either single quotes or double quotes for the string. It generally doesn't matter which one you use, but there are some cases where one is better than the other. If we have two print statements on separate lines, the output on the console will also be on separate lines. So here I have hello on one line, it's in single quotes, so it prints hello on the first line, and then in the next line in my code I have print world, so that prints world on the next line. So now that we know the syntax for printing strings, let's go over some incorrect examples, and let's see if we can spot the error. So what I'm going to do is show a bunch of incorrect print statements, and then you can pause the video and try to figure out the errors, and then we'll go over each of them. Alright, for the first one, we have an uppercase P, and since Python is case sensitive, this won't work. In order to correct the error, we should make it a lowercase p in print. For the second one, we don't have parentheses. And in Python, print statements need parentheses to be enclosing whatever they're printing. For this next one, we don't have any quotation marks, so Python doesn't really know what we're trying to print here. For the next one, we have one starting single quote, but we don't have an ending quote. So what Python is thinking is that we started our print function, we started a string, but the string never ends. So that would cause an error. So for the last one, it's pretty similar to the fourth one. We start off with the double quotes, and we never have an ending double quotes. Remember, we have to start and end the string with the same type of quotes. So in this case, since we started with double quotes, and there are no ending double quotes, this would cause an error. Now let's get to the details of when we would use single quotes or double quotes. So we learned that we can use both interchangeably, but there are some times where one is better than the other. So if we wanted to print something with a contraction like isn't, and we try to use single quotes for that, we have an error. And what happens here is that the compiler sees we have a string isn't, just a random t, and then an unfinished string with this ending parenthesis. So it's really confused, and it just gives us a syntax error. It just tells us we have an invalid syntax going on. So how would we fix this? You can pause the video, try to fix it on your own REPL, and then resume when you think you have the answer. Alright, so one way to solve this is to use double quotes for the main string. And what this does is that it allows us to use single quotes throughout our string. So this fixed the error, and isn't is printed onto the console. Now, let's see when it would be better to use single quotes for the main string. If you wanted double quotes to be printed here, for example, if I want Python in quotation marks to be printed to the console, if I use double quotes for the main string, I would just get two empty strings and then a Python in the middle. That's not even in a string. That would cause an error, a syntax error. And in this case, if we use single quotes for the main string, it would actually work. And we have this output with the double quotes and then Python inside. Again, as I'm going through these examples, it's a good idea to be typing these into REPL just so you can follow along. Our next topic for the day is escape characters. So let's go over some special characters in Python that we can use in strings that will not print literally. Instead, they have a specific output. We call these escape characters because you can think of them as escaping from the literal printing of the string, and they print something else. So what am I talking about? Let's actually go through some examples so we can really understand this concept. So one thing all escape characters have in common is that they start with a backslash. In REPL, you can tell if something is an escape character because the rest of the string will be red in color, while the escape characters are going to be pink. So let's go through the examples of escape characters one by one. The \n here, it creates a new line in the middle of our string. So here, if I were to print hello, and then the escape character for \n, and then world, our output would be hello and world on two separate lines. In REPL.it, what you would see is that the escape character would be pink, this \n would be pink, and the rest of the string would be red. The next escape character is \t, which creates a tab. You can think of this as the tab key on your computer, which is something that sometimes we use when we're at the start of a paragraph in an essay. So here when we do this, we create a space between hi and bye because we have the \t in between them. So if backslash is used for all these escape characters, how would we actually print a backslash? And the answer is use another backslash. So if we use two backslashes, we get one backslash because the backslash serves as an escape character for the other backslash. So here I have a colon and then two backslashes in my print statement, but what's printed is just a colon and one backslash. Another way we can work with printing quotations in strings is just to use a backslash before the quotation. So here if I could do a backslash and then a single quote and then a backslash and then a double quote to get to use the same type of quote for the main string, and then we would get output like this. Since we have isn't here and we are using single quotes for the main string, we could use the backslash single quote to get the apostrophe. Same thing for Python. Alright. Let's get some practice with escape characters. So you can pause this and then predict what it will print. You can also test it out in REPL, and then once you think you're ready, you can play the video. Alright. So for the first one, our main string is in double quotes, and we use the escape character for double quotes around hello. This is why the rest of the string prints as usual, I said, comma, and then for the escape character for the double quotes, we get just the double quotes. The escape character does not print because we're escaping from the literal printing. For the second one, it's a similar thing, but now it's single quotes instead of double quotes. For the next one, we have the new line character, and you can see that we have alpha, then \n, and then bet. So what's happening here is that we print alpha literally, do a space, do a new line, do a space, that's why we have a space at the beginning of this line, and then we do bet. The new line character is just creating a new line in the middle of the string. So here, it may be a tricky with the \t, but we have to remember that the backslashes are going to, the escape characters are going to be in pink, so they will only be corresponding to these other backslashes. So we have the \\, that'll give us one backslash, we have a regular t, and then we have the \\, which will give us another backslash. So one tip when working with backslashes in escape characters is that for every two backslashes that I actually type, my output will only give me one backslash. And this last one says, hasn't, one second, let me just wait for that to go away. It says, hasn't this worked? So it may be a bit confusing seeing the backslash and the apostrophe right next to each other, but we have to realize that this backslash is going with the T. As you can see by the pink colored font, the backslash and T are just one escape character. And that's why it serves as a tab. And that's why we have this space in the middle of the string that's created by the tab. Let's go over a couple more things about print statements. If we have two strings right one after the other, they will be automatically joined while printing. So we have the co string, and then we have the ding string, and they print coding. Also, if we have a blank print statement, that will just print a blank line. So here, if I have up high, that's what the first line prints, and I have a blank print statement, I'll just get this blank line here, and then we'll have down low. Once again, if I wanted this output, I could do it easier using the backslash n escape characters, but just this is a thing to know that we can create a space in the middle if we use a blank print statement as well. Now let's go over string concatenation. So string concatenation is just a vocabulary term that programmers use that means adding strings or combining strings. So if we were to print this out, the string A plus the string B, what we get is this, AB. One thing to remember is that using the plus sign for concatenation does not automatically create a space between the two strings. If we wanted to add a space in between the two strings, we would have to use concatenation like this, with a comma. This will print A and B with a space. Our next topic for the day is printing mathematical expressions. Python can be used as a calculator if we print mathematical expressions. It won't literally print the expression unless we put it inside quotes. Instead, it will actually evaluate it and print the result. So here, since we have 2 plus 4, we know that evaluates 6, Python would print 6. This one, 2 minus 4, is -2, so that is what is printed. And the same applies for multiplication and division. Okay, so if we had more complex mathematical expressions with more than one of these operators, then we'd have to remember to use PEMDAS when evaluating them, and Python will use PEMDAS when evaluating them. So as I mentioned earlier, the main thing about mathematical expressions in Python is that we don't need the quotation marks. If we were to put the quotation marks, Python would think we're trying to print a string, so it would literally print the mathematical expression. For example, if I had 2 plus 4 in quotes and printed that, it would just say 2 plus 4. It wouldn't actually evaluate it to 6. Now that we talked about math and we've also talked about strings, let's combine the two. We can multiply strings by numbers to repeat the string. So here, what would happen is that we'd have the string A be repeated 3 times. So when coding a statement like this, just remember that the A is the only thing in quotation marks and the 3 and the multiplication are outside. Otherwise, it would literally print 3 times A. One thing we have to remember is that we can't add strings and integers directly with a plus sign like this. You may be thinking, oh, it might add it and it might be 7, or oh, maybe it'll concatenate it and it might be 3, 4. But none of those is actually the case. We just get an error. We get this unsupported operand type for plus, int and str. What it's basically saying is that we can't add an int, which is basically a whole number, that's the thing in green, to a string, which is inside the quotes here. But we can, however, use the comma to separate them, and then that will add this space. We may be able to multiply strings, but we can't subtract or divide strings. If we were to do so, we'd get error messages. So even though we have the I at the end, it won't give us an H. It's not sure if like whatever is here is going to be the end of this string. So it just doesn't allow subtraction for two strings, and it also does not allow division. You may be thinking, oh, these three A's here, it'll just divide it into one A and that'll be a result. But no, it's not allowed for strings and integers to be divided. Alright, so another thing that we have to go over is commenting our code. Sometimes in the coding process, we want to make notes in our code so that we know what's happening if you were to reference it later on, or if you're collaborating with someone when working on code. So we can't just directly start typing what we want into Python because that would cause an error. To make these notes, or comments as they are known in programming, we have to start them off with a hashtag. And this is an example of a single line comment. So we can access the hashtag by pressing Shift 3. Once we press that symbol, the rest of the line will be a comment, and it will not affect your code in any way. It will also appear in this light gray font. If we wanted a multi-line comment, we could use the triple double quotes. So this is not a string, it is a comment. If you wanted to write a very long comment that would span multiple lines, we'd have to start it with three double quotes and end it with three double quotes. So now let's just get some practice with print statements. You can pause the video and write your answers or what you think it will print, and then you can press play once you're ready to review them. Alright, for the first one, let's look at our output. We have 2444. Now why does this happen? We have the string 2, and to that we are adding the string 4 times 3. Remember, our order of operations tells us that multiplication comes first. So what we have to do is multiply this string, so that's basically 4 3 times, that's why I have these 4 here, and then we just add it to the end of the string 2. That's why I have this 2444. Right, the next one is just a mathematical operation. We have to do division first by order of operations. So this gives us 1.0. Then we do 9 plus 10 minus 1.0. So 19 minus 1.0, which is 18.0. This next one, since the entire expression is enclosed in strings, it literally prints the entire expression. And for the last one, there's nothing special about it. Just because it has a hashtag doesn't make it a comment. It's still just inside a string, so it will be printed literally. Alright, so we went over a lot today. We went over how to use REPL.it. We went over the syntax for print statements. We learned how to use escape characters. We also learned about string concatenation and mathematical expressions. We also did some math with strings, and we also learned how to make comments in Python. So these are the exercises for this week. Every week we'll usually have a few exercises at the end of class that will go over the material. So you can take a few minutes, pause the video, read through these exercises and complete them. And once you're done, come back to the video and we'll go through them. Alright, so the first one asked us to find different ways to print 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. There's so many different ways you could do this. You could print it as a number or an integer. An integer is just a whole number. You could print it as a string with double quotes, a string with single quotes. You could have strings back to back. You could use concatenation with a plus sign. You could use a mathematical expression. And you can also combine string math and concatenation. Alright, for the second one, we have to print A on 3 separate lines. We can use, we have to use the escape character because we're asked to accomplish the goal in one line of code. We have to use the new line escape character. So what we have here is we do 3 times A backslash n. So what this will do is repeat this code 3 times. Repeat this string 3 times. So we have A goes to the next line, A goes to the next line, and A then goes to the next line. So this will produce output of A on 3 separate lines. And 3 and 4 are just variations of this. This, instead of using 3 times, we actually write it out 3 times. And this one is just combining string math and concatenation to have the same result. For the last one, what we have is 2 main solutions that are the easiest ones. So it would be easier to use double quotes in the main string, which is seen in line 2 of the solutions. Some of the special things to note in this one is that there are 4 backslashes used to create the 2 backslashes after the 2 in the sentence. And we also have the backslash t created for the tab. You could just do a bunch of spaces, but backslash t is a bit easier. Another thing to remember is that forward slashes aren't special in Python. You could type them directly as we have them here. The second solution, which is on line 3, uses single quotes for the main string. In that case, we just have to remember that we have to use the backslash and the single quote in the won't, so we don't get an error there. The rest of it stays pretty much the same. So that's it for this week's presentation. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. Thank you, bye.